Today, I'm very proud that we can talk about one of my favorites, Blazor. And in particular, we want to discuss the question if with Blazor, we really see the full stack or C# full stack utopia. So as a proof that my parents had at least taught me some manners, I would like to introduce myself. Hi, my name is Ben. I would describe myself as a .NET Core developer. Of course, I've tried different technologies, but always ending up in the same space. In general, I think it's a great time to be a developer and even more to be a .NET developer. As for today, I've thought about walking you through 4 different sections. In the first section, we will briefly see what Blazor is. The second section we'll discuss about 2 use cases where you might not expect to see Blazor. We'll talk about how we can use Blazor to transform legacy apps. And in the end, we want to see how you can introduce Blazor into your dev teams or into existing teams. So let's start about what is Blazor. So I'm a big fan of just showing you what I mean, and therefore I've created a kind of small example. If you want to see it for yourself, have a look into the chat, and I will show it for you. Okay, the classical hello world example in Blazor is a button with a counter. And I thought for today we can spice it up a bit also to see the potential of Blazor. So we have a button which says click me, so I will do it, right, as I'm told. And we have a current count of 1. What happened if we click twice? Well, we see our click velocity. And I do as I'm told, so I'm trying to click faster until I reach a certain click frequency. And if I click here to unlock the secret, I see a nice cat picture. Let's have a look at the source code which makes these things possible. Even if you have never seen before Blazor, but C# is quite interesting. We have these things. We have a little bit of code, which is, as you can see, normal C# code. And what we get is this kind of highly interactive thing, which just do stuff for us. So yeah, what does this mean like for us for the Blazor thing? So if we want to sum up, Blazor enables us C# developers to develop feature-rich application. Some call it single-page application, highly interactive thing, doesn't matter. The important thing here is we can build this application entirely by using C#. There's no JavaScript needed, and with the right component library, later I will explain what component libraries are, also HTML and CSS become kind of optional knowledge towards it. So if you want to answer the question if the C# full stack utopia has arrived, we have to first make sure that we understand the terms here. C# is quite easy. Full stack, I think we all gotten kind of understanding. What is utopia in this context? So in most cases, utopia is referred as a place or state where everything is perfect. All humans are happy, all humans are fed, no war, whatever you want to imagine. Even while there's a lot of cultural references earlier to such places. The terms goes back to a book by Thomas More in the 1500s. What I mean with earlier, if you think about, there are a lot of stories. We can go back to the ancient Greek and Homer. There's an episode inside the Odyssey where Odysseus find an island with this kind of state. We can also think about the Garden of Eden to a certain extent was this kind of utopia in the Christian belief thing. I, as a German, or as a native German speaker, there are also terms referring to it, for instance, Schlaraffenland. So point here is, we as humans have the tendency to think about a better place. We try to think what could be the next evolution. And this leads to the thing where we can transform it. We can transform the question of utopia back to, it's not a state, but it's a process. And if we understand utopia as a process, the question transforms. It is not about, are we there? It's about, are we on the right track? So whatever this new state is it better as the state before? Or back to Blazor, the question for this talk is essentially, is Blazor better than technologies before? And better in itself, it's very interesting because better is highly personal. And especially when we come to things like utopia, what is for one and don't open with any politics here, but we can see what is for one, let's say, party a step into the right direction is seen as the by the other as the opposite, as a way to a better to like a worse place. So if you think about, again, utopia is the question of is Blazor better as whatever is before and better as personal? We can arrange an agreement in a way like my job for today is to provide me use cases, context, talk about my experience. But your job for this talk is to answer the question of better for yourself. And by doing so, I would like to provide you two use cases where I think you wouldn't expect to see Blazor around. But before we jumping into the use cases, it's like a lot of question customer ask, and you also see on the internet, it's like, is Blazor ready? And then you will see certain, I wouldn't call it arguments, I would call it like statements or claims. One, which is again in kind of exaggeration, but they're pointing into this direction, like Blazor can't be used for customer-facing apps. Interesting. Let's stick for one thing. Also, one of Blazor is not mature enough. The thing is, what does mature even mean? And when is something mature enough? Or what I really like in conjunction with the first, Blazor should only be used for internal apps. Think about Blazor is not good enough for customer-facing apps, but you can use it for internal apps, which means like, yeah, you can serve your colleagues things you wouldn't serve your customer, which is again an interesting implication of the culture behind it. And also we see things like the latency, which is like the thing in Blazor server side, kills the interaction. Whatever interaction and killing in this context means, or also one of my favorites, WASM, which is like the when it runs entirely in a browser, is too slow for real use cases. The question again is, what does too slow mean, and what are real use cases? So for today, I would like us to challenge this assumption. I would like to see, are they true, or to what extent they are true? And to doing so, we will have a look what is behind the curtain. And yes, I really love the PowerPoint animation. It is too much in any situation, but now I finally found something. Okay, first use case. It was a project I was working on. We had the task, or was tasked, to develop a kind of Wi-Fi access control management portal. So things you can see on the airport or other stuff too. In this case, for a small coastal town, like where tourism was still a thing, this app or application system includes a register screen for users with, let's say, advanced validation of sending SMS to their mobile phones, or some other things too. We had an admin app for statistics and certain actions, and also like a push for outages or usage reports. And without going into much detail, let's have a look at the solution, or the solution file. And this is a quite interesting or quite remarkable thing about Blazor. If you have a look here at these, it's simplified. I left out some projects, but if we have a look at it again, we see we have one language. All of these projects are C#. We're using one technology stack, the same libraries we can use in the client, in this case, for instance, the admin portal, we can also use in our domain. And it is one tool chain. So we can select a project, we can run from a pipeline perspective. There are the same commands. Again, one language, one technology stack, one tool chain throughout the entire application system. And this is what I still think highly, highly remarkable. Another thing I would like to talk about is rapid prototyping. For rapid prototyping, it is important to understand the mindset behind it. What I mean by it is referring, think about the classic situation of a startup. You have a certain amount of money, meaning you have a certain amount of time where you can pay people. Then this time you need to find a sustainable business model. So this is what I'm referring to rapid prototyping. And to understand what rapid prototyping is, or how it's distinguished from production, what is the purpose of production? So if we're building a production system, the purpose of the system is to extract as many value as possible. So in case of a business, this value can mean money. In case of an organization, this could mean awareness. And therefore we develop things in a production-like state. For rapid prototyping, the entire purpose is to maximize learning. So a prototype, an ideal prototype means with no time, we can learn the most. So the faster the learning, the more efficient the prototype. And again, in these startup scenarios, each week matters a lot. And if we can cut development times, if we can create prototypes faster, the chances or the opportunities to discover a sustainable business model raising significantly. At the same time, we all are accustomed to a certain standard of web application. So even the best business model, I would assume, if it looked like, let's say, Windows 2000, it wouldn't have much users. So we are in the same situation where we need to create also an appealing prototype. It's like a greenfield project in this case, and because we want to go fast and other stuff, we in most cases we just try to build an API, build a client with a JS framework, Angular or React or whatever is like the next big thing on Monday. Important thing is we have this kind of incredible speed, which is incredibly likely to breaking things, and we deal still with a lot of complexity. With Blazor, we take out one degree, or we take one thing out of the equation. We don't need an API anymore, as you see, to create these highly interactive applications. With each changes, they are quick. We have a compiler which makes type checking and a lot of other stuff, so we can move quickly by, and with moderately, I always mean manageable, but moderately increasing the technical depth. And if we also go the next step and choosing cloud services, which are not, again, optimized for production, but optimized for quick moving, we have a very high velocity in these type of projects. To sum up this kind of case study, I never, and I talk here from a lot of experience, it happens to me in the last project too, never underestimate the feedback of real users of a real application. And in my experience, with a Blazor and the right team and the right circumstances, what would take a production a month can be broken down to a week, sometimes less. Again, not production style, not being the most secure, just being rapid to learn quickly. Yeah. While these both use cases talked before about greenfield development, and I think as a developer, we have a kind of tendency to preferring these type of application. There are also legacy application. And even if I don't like the name and not the connotation, it is, I want to refer to apps which are already in place. And now we are tasked to make them better, replacing them. So legacy in itself is for me a multi-dimensional thing. And I like to refer to the legacy cube. What I mean by this, we can imagine we have a technically sophisticated solution which doesn't serve a business purpose anymore. We can also have the opposite, like a technical not sophisticated solution which serves a business purpose. Or we can have a technically sophisticated solution which still serves a very valid business purpose, but it's development with a, let's say, mindset. I'm now referring like to DevOps, other stuff, which are just not, used anymore. For this talk, we will really just focus on the technical dimension. So this kind of cube in this case becomes a scale. And on the right side of the scale, we have very well-designed applications. They're just suffering from using outdated technologies like databases which are not supported anymore, or for instance, using DCOM as communication in between. On the left side, we have something which is like, I'm referring to it burns in a way. In most cases, we have also like a very valid business need. You have this application which looks like something you don't want to be necessarily involved in, but you have to. And also in these cases, Blazor can be a very, very good thing, but through preparation, I realized it would be too much of a time to talk also about these, but we can have a discussion about it. For now, I would like to focus on the area in between. So applications which are not poorly designed, but also not as good as they can be. And during my work as a consulting and as a mentor, I discovered there's a pattern. In this middle area, there's something which I would like to refer as MVC-JS Glue type of applications. And let's explore them a bit, because I can imagine we have seen, or many of us have seen, like the kind of similar thing here. So a quick recap of MVC, again, from the perspective of a web app. In MVC, my server sending back a static document or a document. The browser renders this document. If I want to, this document will have links on it or forms, and either the links or forms will lead to new documents, which is totally fine. Now we have the point where we want to have some dynamic, which then JavaScript comes in place. JavaScript enables us to modify this document after it was served by a server. So for instance, we want to hide some fields on a form or want to enable them. This is maybe where we started. Later we realized, yeah, it would be good to like change a part of the application. So we're making a call to a controller. This controller doesn't return an entire document, just a partial document. And we're ending up in a place where the page, what the user sees, is a mix. It's a mix of JS used to generate and our controllers, and both serving or creating the final result. The other things we see, JS handle some of the user flow, like I have a submit and then redirect the user to another page. But I also find the same structures in the controller. I still have my routing. I still have some forms which are submitted directly to controllers. In this type of application, testing becomes very complicated because of this divide of this flow. And to be honest, it's often not done, I think, because it's become complicated. These applications, to be clear, are working well, but changes are difficult. Exactly like Glue is working. Glue is a great thing to connect stuff. It's working great. It can be stable and can be used for ages. The problem arises when you're trying to change stuff because you can't unglue them. And again, the thing, if we're referring to our initial question, is Blazor better? Let's have a look how Blazor avoid or can avoid this kind of style of an application. First, this interaction we want, right? We introduced JavaScript in the first place to have interaction. We introduced MVC because of the simpliness. With Blazor, we get both. We get a model which is simple, and we have the interactivity as the full thing. I mean, of course, you can think of ways around it, but it's like, therefore, you have really to leave a certain path. All the entire user flow, like routing, like sending forms, is in a single framework again. And what Blazor does, Blazor don't think about a single page, so what the user can see. It thinks about components. So pages are made of components, and the components itself are smaller and therefore more manageable. But most importantly, and I know I've said it before, it breaks down to the same points in our first case study. We use one language, we use one technology stack, and we use one toolchain. And if you have worked with these MVC apps, you're starting to build to have just a pipeline with, let's say, the task to deploy or .NET thing. Then you're ending up with a task runner, JavaScript task runner to optimize your file. You may be ending up with a TypeScript compiler in between. So you're adding a layer of complexity to layer of complexity to layer of complexity. And with Blazor, again, one language which optimized by default, one technology stack, meaning I can use the same libraries across different places, and I have one toolchain. Let's say, just for this kind of talk here, you are very happy with Blazor, but there's still one thing you have to consider to make a valid or to make an assumption about the usefulness of it. And it breaks down to the cost of adoption. This isn't necessarily singular to Blazor. It is true for all technologies. So think about, you have a team of developers, and these developers creating a certain amount of features per week, per sprint, per month. So you can say they have a certain velocity. Now you task this team with learning a new technology. And what you will see, their velocity, their productivity will decline. In this first phase, you see your devs experimenting with this technology, seeing like, is there a use case, how we do it, and they're getting slower over time, until they reach like the actual valley here. And at these points, they're getting, or their velocity increases because they're starting to internalizing things like, these are the concepts behind this framework. This is how I can reach for how I can reach for help. This is how the internals work, and you see that the velocity is increasing until it reached the kind of pre-stage. After after these after this period, hopefully the velocity is higher than before. So we investing time and money in the learning valley and hoping for harvesting a lot. And with these in mind, we can break it down and say, yeah, each adoption is beneficial if the increase, the harvesting, is outweighs the decrease. And we have a lot of degrees of freedom. So for instance, we can say, I want to use Blazor 3 years. So your harvesting period gets bigger. So maybe you can invest more in learning. Or we can think about, yeah, but maybe in Blazor, how we can shrink it, how we can make it that people has less experiment and the internalizing goes faster. So what are obstacles you don't have to fight or you won't fight when you're adopting Blazor? Rephrasing this thing I said before, you don't have to use a different language. You don't have to get used to different tool set and you don't have to use a different ecosystem. So it shrinks a bit. Also, if you have, are you one of these guys who knows these kind of Silverlight? I know some people have like, yeah, shuddering when they hears this word like, it's not Blazor, don't rely on non-standard browser packets. And with Blazor, because eventually it is HTML and CSS. So it's easy to find UI experts, unlike, let's say, for instance, Xamarin Forms or WPF, which are very specialized to this platform. Obstacles of adopting Blazor, and there are. It is the concept of components. And again, I've seen it when I introduce Blazor to teams. I see it from people reaching out for me for help. The concept of components are quite overwhelming, I would say, at the beginning. And also the communication between these components. Think about components as classes. And if we are honest, how many years of experience it takes us to really understand classes, how we can structure a project with class and how we let them communicate so that things become easier. Again, it's not particular to Blazor, it's just the concept of how we build good applications. At the same time, Blazor is still young. I'm not saying not mature, I'm saying young, meaning there are currently like different streams of what best practice are. Some trying to copy these things which work in Angular or React, this kind of state management. Some trying to get influences from things like messaging inside these components. And also, if you have not experienced before, the layout system itself relays on HTML. And I started my career as a WPF developer, and the layout system WPF makes sense. When I then came to HTML or as a layout system, it was quite confusing. And to be honest, sometimes it still is. So I think the layout system itself is a kind of obstacle. Another thing we can try to, again, shrinking this learning valley are so-called component libraries. Component libraries lowering the entry barrier in a way that they're providing or that they're already solving common tasks. You need a tab layout. Here you have your tab layout. You need a date picker. Here you have your date picker. So these component libraries can speed up your learning process because they're reducing the amount of knowledge, of experience you need to, again, create sophisticated results. I'm very, very proud to be a contributor of one of these component libraries, which is called MudBlazor. MudBlazor was created because we wanted that every developer can create beautiful looking and highly usable Blazor apps without, and this is very important, we also need to understand the technologies around it. And on a, let's say, user scale, we're trying to removing obstacles to adopt Blazor. And to show what Blazor is, again, it's just great to have some examples. This is like library here. There are a lot of components which are already ready to use. And I just want to show one component. Again, you can see a lot. I'm looking for pickers where we have our date picker. So you want that your users can choose a date for arrival, for a booking, whatever. Click on this button, select a date, it is working. And all you need is this type of Blazor/Razor syntax, reducing obstacles. which means on a huge scale, we're trying to develop a kind of ecosystem around it. We are currently working on a MudStore, which is like a marketplace for themes, because if you think about, again, adopting Blazor, you think about Angular, there are like 1,000, 10,000 admin themes on the different things, but not for Blazor. We're also trying to create like a Mud Academy where we can share learning resources for Blazor, and also to enrich the ecosystem, creating a way where developers can more easily develop their own components by, for instance, providing a document or framework of documentation, by providing a space where they can advertise for their libraries. So overall, with these component libraries, with all these learning, we're trying to shrink, we're trying to reduce the cost of adopting Blazor so that your productivity reaches like new highs. And this is essentially what I think Blazor is. So to wrap all of these up, what are like the kind of key takeaways Blazor offers, and I still think this is quite remarkable, a unified approach to modern web applications. And if you say, yeah, JS does too, it doesn't. You have Node and you have your framework of your choice. It's just the same language, but not the same concepts. As I hope I could show you, you can accelerate the development speed of new application dramatically if you're using Blazor. Again, right circumstances, right team, and a lot of other things have to be in place as well. And also, you can prevent common traps, which doesn't mean you can't create new ones, but it's like, it's easier. Which brings back, if we think about our arrangement from the start. So is C# really the full stack utopia? And as I said, if we're understanding as a process, for me, is a huge step forward. For you, it's totally depending on your context. So yeah, maybe not the best answer, but always solutions depending on your context. So right in time, have a look. If you, I can strongly recommend checking out our work, what we have done here. I think it can help, or we think it can help. And yeah, thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And yeah, so the point now here is like, I want to have a discussion with you. Feel free to raise your hand so you can, I see the first one, feel free to raise the hand to ask a question, or you can type in the chat, right? Whatever you feel comfortable. Yeah. And first thing, Stella. More and yeah, okay. And was like, someone asked a question. Yeah. Is there a time where you wouldn't recommend using Blazor? Okay, good question. Let's say, and I'm working here with exaggerations, just to pointing out or just to creating a certain image. So reality is more complex here. Sometimes there are teams who have done WinForms for the last 20 years, who are reluctant to any concepts of web at all. So for these teams, Blazor can be quite confusing, and creating an environment where they, again, exaggerating, can be hostile against change in general and hostile against web. This is one thing. Other thing, if you really need support for very old browsers, and sometimes there are these recommendations for, I'm not sure, government or other stuff. So for Blazor itself, if you're using server side, I can explain later, you have to make sure that SignalR or WebSockets are supported. And for other browsers, you need to make sure that they can understand WebAssembly. Okay, does it answer your question? Okay, are there more questions or things I should show? Or as I said, it's like, I deeply enjoy Blazor and I hope everyone does too. But as always, there are constraints too. There are constraints, yeah. Oh, very good question. I just read it out loud. I hear two approaches for study Blazor. First, make a real application. Second, make components. What is your recommendation? Very good question. Let's say, if you try to make components like in component library, you really get into a lot of technical details, which can be overwhelming. If you're going for an application, you see the big picture. So the question goes back to, let's say, what type of learner you are. I, for instance, like to know everything, whatever everything means, before I get started. So for me, the doing component was more useful. Again, it's depending on your learning type. Making components, especially in the work, for instance, MudBlazor, I saw things which I wouldn't expect it when I started, but also making applications, and you see like what patterns you can use. So both are valuable. Breaking down to your learning type, if you are like a detail-oriented learner, go for component. If you are a big picture person, go for applications. Answer two? I'm just taking it here, and I don't have to look around. Yeah, more questions. Or anything I should show, or yeah. And in general, if you have any question you want to discuss personally, always feel free to reaching out. I just go to the next slide in case you're curious about how to do so. And I also want just to copy and paste these things so you have something here. So yeah, as I said, I'm a big believer in Blazor, which doesn't necessarily mean like this fanboy thing. Just saying, I know there are circumstances where Blazor will be not a good decision, but overall, I deeply believe it's making our job easier, because at the same time we can create better application having less struggle, especially with the MVC-JS pseudo-dynamic type. Yeah. Oh, sorry. I sometimes can here. Sorry, this is so yeah. Again, I can strongly encourage, if you have any questions, if you want to see if Blazor works in your team or in your application, or you have any things in particular, I really, really like to talk about Blazor. Yeah. I mean, yeah. If there are no more questions, I guess, right? It's not. I mean, as I said, I liking things, but I also totally understand that it's late around the globe, also on my time. And yeah. So last opportunity to ask questions. And okay, good example. Just give me 1 second so I can show you a solution, right? So the question is like, how is unit testing done in Blazor? Just 1 tiny second. 10 a.m. Yeah, great thing. So this is the component library I was talking about, and let's just have a look at one unit test here. So I know it's a lot of code and other stuff, just to make sure. What do we take? Where? Okay, so for unit testing, there's a framework which is called BUnit. And with BUnit, it emulates the kind of surroundings around components. So it's essentially, it's pretty much similar to other frameworks too. So we're starting this is like our component under test. So we're trying to render these components here. And then we check, well, I want to see all these panels, or these panels in this case should be empty. Or now I want to click this button. And based on click of this button, something should change in the layout. So I'm checking if I see something. I know it's like a lot of internals here, but I still, hopefully it's like showing the concept here. of doing unit testing. Or you say, now I want to click on another tab, and now I should see two elements which should have these values. So this is essentially unit testing. Does it give you like an indication how you can do unit testing? Again, unit, creating your component, doing whatever you want to with your component, loading, clicking, and then checking if the result, either component-wise or HTML, is what you're expecting. Okay. Again, there are details with dependency injection and other stuff and race conditions, but overall, yeah. As I said, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for attending. I hope you enjoyed it too. And well, wherever you are, good morning or good evening, and all the best. Thank you very much.